Welcome to Shaq's house. Shaq's house. That's our Shaq. You're now in Shaq's house. Welcome to Shaq's house.
Hey, what's going on, Shaq House? This is your boy, the one and only Shaq House. That's right. Hope your week went well. Check this out. Thank you for the support you gave me on my WizKid video. Thank you for that. But this week, like I said in the last video, I'd be talking about a character who's pretty much suited up. And he's pretty much his country's version of Captain America. He's Canada's premier superhero, James MacDonald Hudson. Guardian, Vindicator, Weapon Alpha, whatever you want to call him, just say his name right. Or like MF Doom once said, make sure you spell the man's name in all caps. Oh, that doesn't apply to Guardian, but I think the gist of it still applies. Yeah, he counts as an X-Men character because he first appeared in X-Men. Yeah, he's one of John Byrne's characters from long before he ever got into comics. And he's been resurrected so many times, he puts Jean Grey to shame. So check it out. Oh, and some shout-outs to Classic X-Men, Power of X-Men, and the Homo Superior podcast. I hope I get to meet y'all one day. You guys are in my backyard in D.C. I'm on Maryland. Let's meet up one day. Check it out. Guardian from Alpha Flight, his suit, and even his family relations. You're going to learn all about that too. Enjoy!
Okay, why don't we start off with the man's bio? Born and raised in London, Ontario, Canada, James MacDonald Hudson was a child prodigy with an aptitude for science. Attending college through a student loan program, he invented a prototype cybernetic control helmet before graduating with a PhD. Immediately after graduating, he was hired by the American-Canadian petrochemical company, AMCAN, a corporate merging of American and Canadian oil interests. They provided Mac with funding and materials to create a supersuit, an exoskeletal suit to be controlled by a cybernetic helmet. He believed that the suit was going to be used for exploring underground, but in actuality, his employer sold the design of the American military as a weapon. Furious at this deceit, but powerless legally as he built the suit with AMCAN's resources, Mac took matters into his own hands. At night, he donned the exosuit and blasted his way into AMCAN's private vault, destroying his original blueprints for the suit. Mac then fled the premises and abandoned the suit nearby. He kept the cybernetic helmet as he designed it long before going to work for AMCAN, and it was legally his. And without the helmet, the exosuit was useless. Shortly, an AMCAN executive secretary, a teenaged Heather McNeil, she had a serious crush on Mac and came to his apartment. Confessing her feelings for him a day after his breaking and entering, they formed a plan to help him avoid legal convictions. The Canadian government paid AMCAN for any damages caused by Hudson and also exploited legal loopholes to have Hudson retroactively declared as an employee of the Canadian government since college. In exchange, Mac met with the Prime Minister and the Canadian Secret Services and agreed to help in the formation of a top-secret research and development division in the Ministry of Defense, dubbed Department H after Hudson. Mac also fully rebuilt his terraforming exoskeleton from memory to go with his cybernetic helmet, and Department H dubbed it Weapon Alpha. But despite the fancy name, Hudson had no intention of operating the suit himself. Later, with the public debut of the Fantastic Four, Mac realized that Canada need not only super agents, but superheroes. So Mac went to work further upgrading his exoskeleton with revolutionary microcircuitry advancements to make it more of an impressive outfit for a superhero to wear. He also began revamping Department H to accommodate superheroes as well. Department H's prototype for what later became Alpha Flight proved to be disastrous. The group's failure against the Eggheads, emissaries of evil, forced Mac to reevaluate the whole program. So as a result, he adopted a multi-tier training scenario, with raw recruits undergoing basic training in Gamma Flight, a reserve group undergoing more advanced training in Beta Flight, before graduating to the active team of heroes that would become known as Alpha Flight. Mac also resigned himself to the responsibility of wearing the exosuit himself, and serving as leader of this new Alpha Flight. And after a few skirmishes with the X-Men, the Prime Minister finally pulled the funding for Department H, leaving Alpha Flight without any financial backing. However, weeks later, some of its members were drawn to fight and defeat a villain named Tundra, and shortly afterwards, Alpha Flight decided to remain together as a team even without Department H's backing and operate from then on as independent superheroes. Mac also went through several code name changes during this time: Weapon Alpha, Vindicator, and finally Guardian. The latter was adopted because, though he acknowledged that he was Canada's unofficial Captain America, he still felt that he needed a stronger code name. However, Alpha Flight were basically part-time superheroes with no day jobs, so when the Roxxon oil company offered Mac an engineering job in the United States, he jumped at the opportunity. However, it turned out to be an elaborate ruse, a revenge plot by former AMCAN employees and former Gamma Flight members who later became known as Omega Flight. The main one, Jerry Jackson, nearly beat Guardian to death using the box armor. However, Mac sent a lethal charge back through the control helmet and fried Jackson's brain, killing him. But Hudson still remained in danger, thanks to the damage that his power pack suffered, and the energy that was building in his power pack was going to come to an explosive release. He only had seconds to disengage the power pack and was distracted at the last moment when Heather burst into the room. The power pack exploded, apparently reducing Mac to cinders where he stood. But things were not what they seemed. Knowing that his exploding power pack would not only kill him, but his wife as well, Hudson activated a failsafe of the suit's properties at literally the last second. By manipulating both the gravity and electromagnetic forces in the proper manner, the explosion of the power pack could be used to open up a rift in the space-time continuum, bleeding off the full force of the blast extra-dimensionally. So Mac knowingly sacrificed himself to the rift in order to spare Heather's life. And the cinder that we thought was left of Mac, that was because the displacement carbonized the air around him in the blast, leaving behind what appeared to be a silhouette of ash that crumbled into nothing. The displacement cast Guardian 10,000 years into the past and millions of miles away as he crash materialized on the surface of Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons. Dying of exposure and lack of oxygen, the non-human aliens known as the Quirlin rescued him. Looking like brains in giant jars and possessing a highly advanced and organically grown form of technology, the Quirlin did their best to preserve Hudson's life. But because they were unfamiliar with human physiology, that led them to rebuild Mac as a cyborg, incorporating the damaged circuitry of his exoskeleton and its capabilities directly into his body. After learning just how far he had moved through time and space, they conceived of a plan for returning him to his proper time and place in the universe. So Mac was placed in suspended animation for 10,000 years until his world was ready to receive him again. He awoke to find that the Quirlin had long since abandoned the lunar colony, but left him behind a starship to travel back to Earth. His ship crash-landed on Earth only a short time, relatively speaking, after his battle with Omega Flight in the same area. He and his craft were recovered by a Roxxon oil company salvage ship, and the company secretly transferred him to their facility in Denver, Colorado, keeping him in a comatose state for several years while trying to find a way to exploit his cybernetic mind for their benefit. The cybernetic portion of Mac's mind worked to free him from his captivity, and eventually it managed to integrate directly into the Roxxon facility's cyberweb and assume control over the building's mechanical systems. Roxxon tried to solve the problem with mutants such as Windshear, Madison Jeffries, and finally Forge. But the facility coordinator, Samuel Higgins, he wanted the situation solved without anyone stumbling onto Hudson himself. With the chances of finding Hudson's presence dropping fast, he attempted to turn off Hudson's life support. In response, this caused Hudson's mechanical system to strike back in self-defense, destroying the whole facility and turning it into a massive crater, revealing Hudson at its core. Madison Jeffries eventually reached Hudson, and he managed to reawaken the human side of Mac's brain by talking to him about Heather and Alpha Flight. Fully conscious, Hudson was able to separate himself from Roxxon, return to Canada, and rejoin Alpha Flight as Vindicator and reunite with his wife. But during a battle alongside the Avengers against the Intergalactic Consortium, Hudson seemingly sacrificed his life to power a teleportation effect of his heroes back to Earth. But in actuality, he was shunned into null space, where he was later discovered by the Alpha Flight villain known as the Master of the World. The Master healed and brainwashed Hudson, renaming him the Anti-Guard and sending him against Alpha Flight as a member of the Master's Omega Flight team. Ultimately, Heather's love for Hudson allowed him to reassert control and side with his former teammates against the Master. Hudson rejoined Alpha Flight, but only to learn that the government had suspended them from active duty once more because of an investigation into the Master's attempted political takeover of Canada. Mac and Heather started to drift apart, and Heather was eventually forced into a new Alpha Flight by a new, more clandestine incarnation of Department H. There, she was seemingly reunited with Hudson, who was no longer a cyborg, but apparently regressed to the age of 19. In reality, this was actually a clone of James MacDonald Hudson, who had been previously created by the Prometheus Division during the early days of Department H. While investigating this new Department H, the true Hudson was captured, mind-wiped, and his suit programmed to carry him into the space to die. However, Hudson resisted, and he reversed his trajectory to crash land in Antarctica, where Alpha Flight team member Sasquatch nursed him back to health. On the eve of the birth of his and Heather's child, Hudson was attacked by fellow scientist Dr. Girault, who was obsessed with Heather and saw killing Hudson as the only way to win her back. Restored to life with the help of Shaman's ancestor spirits, though physically crippled, Hudson donned an experimental exosuit to prevent Girault from killing Heather and his unborn child. Hudson was later fully healed by the X-Man known as Archangel and was reunited with Heather and their newborn daughter. After the X-Men's Juggernaut and Northstar visited Juggernaut's friend Sammy Pear, aka Squid Boy, in Canada, and discovered him being physically abused by his father, Hudson, Heather, and Sasquatch were called into action when the Juggernaut flew into a rage. Wearing specialized battle armor, the trio quelled the Juggernaut's rampage and took him into custody. Soon after, Mac and most of his teammates were captured by the alien Plodex in an attempted conquest of Earth. Evading capture, Sasquatch quickly assembled a new Alpha Flight to rescue his teammates. Opposed by Plodex constructs of the original team, the novice heroes managed to defeat them and liberate Alpha Flight. Hudson and his teammates opted to transport the Plodex eggs back to their homeworld, leaving Canada's security in the hands of this new team. Soon after, the new team sought to help Alpha Flight's old foe Flashback, leading them on a cross-time caper that resulted in past versions of the original Alpha Flight team, including Hudson, being brought forward to the present. After returning from the Plodex homeworld, Guardian was later one of several team members that apparently perished in battle against the Collective. After that, Alpha Flight was once again raised from the dead by Shaman to help the Great Beast defeat the Chaos King and his armies. And despite being close friends and family with several mutants, Mac joined the anti-mutant terrorist organization known as Orchis after the planet Mars was terraformed into planet Araco and declared the capital of the solar system by Krakoa. James was extremely torn by this decision, but viewed the potential threat to humanity as too great to ignore. But after the third Hellfire Club gala and Orchis' fatal attack on it, he is appalled by them. So from then on, he and several Alpha Flight members pretended to cooperate with Orchis and the Canadian government in their attempt against mutants, when in actuality, they were working with Northstar's resistance effort. Before these acts of treason, Alpha Flight were arrested and jailed, and they remain there now. Okay, that's James MacDonald Hudson's bio, and we talked about his suit and his cyborg capabilities. James MacDonald Hudson, he was an engineer who designed a cybernetic control helmet for an accompanying exoskeletal suit that would enable the wearer to bore through the earth in exploring for oil or other geological resources. Originally, the exoskeleton was a massive hydraulic suit of armor that applied electromagnetic principles to enhance the wearer's strength and shield them from injury. It also included sonic amplifiers that were originally designed for mapping out underground caves as a form of sonar, but could also be used to pick up on distant sounds. It also had boot jets that enabled the suit to fly, and concussion blasters that were designed for tunneling purposes, but could be used as offensive weapons as well. The cybernetic helmet converted the wearer's thoughts into command code for the suit, allowing the wearer to control it mentally. As Weapon Alpha, Hudson had refined the exoskeletal suit considerably, slimming it down and converting it into nothing more than a skin-tight weave of microcircuitry worn underneath his costume. The suit was now comprised of a steel mesh containing an array of 1,200 miniature electromagnetic projectors that generated a stress pattern within the local area of the Earth's electromagnetic field. Through these means, Guardian's battlesuit could tap into high-order energies that the suit could utilize for other purposes. The suit served as an exoskeleton for Guardian that amplified his natural strength, and it used a fast, large-capacity computer to channel energy through the exoskeleton in lines of force that precisely paralleled Guardian's musculature, thereby magnifying his strength. By directing dispersed beams of force towards the ground, Guardian could fly at a maximum speed of up to Mach 1, the speed of sound, about 770 miles per hour. He could also use the battlesuit to form a protective force field at a distance of about 3 inches from his armor. The force field dampened inertia but did not cancel it, as Guardian could still be staggered by sufficient impact. The maximum impact that the field could diffuse was 1,750 foot-pounds per second. Above that level, residual inertial effects become excessive. The field could also absorb and shunt the energies of most incoming radiations in the electromagnetic spectrum. The force field was controlled by a cybernetic link and was left on during flight to protect against high-speed winds and mid-air collisions. Guardian could also shoot beams of concussive force from his gauntlets with a force equivalent to about 250 pounds of TNT. His gauntlets could also ionize matter into a superheated plasma state, which Guardian could then shape into simple forms. Mac originally intended for the suit's blasting capability to serve as digging tools, and using the battlesuit's blasts, he could move through bedrock at a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour. Guardian's battlesuit computer used a high-resolution, solid-state, laser interferometry navigation system that could compute every component of Guardian's movement relative to the Earth. Guardian could trigger the computer to fire a beam of gravitons in the exact direction that would cancel the Earth's rotation relative to himself. This caused a nearly instantaneous acceleration, which at the equator, where Guardian would reach his maximum speed, meant that Guardian would reach about 1,000 miles per hour. To the unaided human eye, Guardian would have seemed to have instantaneously teleported himself from one location to another, and Guardian's force field automatically activated during this rapid acceleration for safety's sake. However, the maximum distance that he could jump by these means is not yet known. Employing the suit as Weapon Alpha, Vindicator, and later Guardian, Mac was apparently killed when his suit was damaged and exploded, leaving nothing but ash. He was eventually discovered to be alive, though. You see, moments before his suit exploded, Hudson triggered the jump effect at a maximum capacity, transporting him back in time to one of Jupiter's moons, where he was found by the colonists known as the Querlin. Being inhuman in appearance, the Querlin were not familiar with human physiology, so when they treated Mac's injuries, they did not differentiate between flesh and metal. So as a result, Guardian was rebuilt as a cyborg, with his suit's capabilities incorporated into his own body. He was placed in stasis and eventually returned to Earth in the proper era, rejoining Alpha Flight as Vindicator while his wife, Heather, became Guardian. As a cyborg, Mac had certain additional abilities, such as electromagnetic sensitivity, which allowed him to scan wavelengths and frequencies in order to pick up and track different energy signatures, and computer enhancements to his brain that vastly increased his ability to calculate mathematical principles and probabilities, and also granted him a photographic memory, incredible mental processing skills, and vast mental storage capacities. Further, his body has increased stamina and endurance and could convert perspiration into electrical energy by means of electro-osmotic reactions. After Alpha Flight disbanded, Hudson tried to use the Lazarus protocols to return himself to normal. Lazarus was a Department H project theorized as a healing tool, reversing an injured person's physical time frame by a few hours or days, and thereby removing all traces of their wounds. Hudson planned to reverse his cybernetics in order to return to a regular human being whose emotional responses weren't inhibited by machinery. Though he was apparently successful, Department H had become a more malevolent clandestine organization at the time, and Hudson was removed, and when his wife Heather was recruited in Department H for a new Alpha Flight program to find her husband, what she found instead was a 19-year-old biosynthetic duplicate of James, whom Department H claimed was the real Mac, having overdosed on the Lazarus protocols. The teenage Hudson didn't know any different himself and was poised to lead the new Alpha Flight as Guardian. Heather was given a new bodysuit and joined the team as Vindicator. But based on the revelations about this teenage Guardian, it's unclear whether the Lazarus protocols ever truly existed or if the real Guardian did indeed succeed at reversing his cybernetics. But in either case, the original Guardian's cybernetic enhancements, they have not been referenced again after that story, and since that time, the real James MacDonald Hudson has returned. Okay folks, here's some fun facts about Mac. James MacDonald Hudson is a genius-level intellect who holds a PhD in engineering. He is a brilliant inventor, engineer, and above-average athlete with extensive training in hand-to-hand combat. He is also an excellent strategist and leader. Heather McNeil Hudson is his wife, mother to his unnamed daughter, and several years his junior. In fact, she was a teenager when they first started dating and she developed a crush on him. It sounds statutory, but the age of consent in Canada is 16, so they're good. Mac's been killed and resurrected more times than Jean Grey, and he, along with the rest of the original Alpha Flight, are creations of John Byrne. And Mac was created by Byrne long before Byrne even entered the comic industry. And Byrne, being a Canadian himself, created the character as an answer to Captain America, originally naming him the Canadian Shield. But when he brought it to Marvel, Marvel rejected that name, and so Byrne renamed him Guardian, which Marvel also rejected. It was Chris Claremont's idea to codename the character Weapon Alpha and later Vindicator, both of which Byrne disliked. So when Marvel greenlit the Alpha Flight title with Byrne as the writer and the artist, he rechristened his character Guardian. Also, though his wife took up his code names after his various deaths and resurrections, she didn't take up the same suit as him. Hers was geothermal, not electromagnetic. Also, Byrne created Mac as a Canadian Reed Richards, but minus superpowers. Like Reed, he's a science nerd who's easily distracted by it. He met his future wife when she was a teenage girl with a huge crush on him, and his creation of Alpha Flight was inspired by the Fantastic Four. He also appeared along with the rest of Alpha Flight in the 90s X-Men cartoon, making his intro in a homage to his first appearance. Also, even though he's no mutant, he's got plenty of friends and family who are. Family? That's right. You see, during their honeymoon, Mac and Heather discovered a man in the Canadian wilderness after he escaped from the Weapon X program after he underwent the adamantium bonding process. They tamed his savagery enough for him to become best friends with them and eventually join Alpha Flight as the mutant known as Wolverine. But the funny thing is, Mac and Logan are blood relatives, and here's how. Wolverine's mother, her name is Elizabeth Howlett, but her maiden name is Hudson. And she had two older brothers, Elias and Frederick Hudson. Frederick is where it gets really interesting. Frederick was in charge of the military training camp in Canada where Logan, even though neither one of them knew of their relation, where Logan trained to be part of the Devil's Brigade during World War II. It's also where Logan first met the brutal and sadistic drill instructor, Silas Burr, who later became the villain known as Cyber. Elias was in charge of the Hudson Bay Company, where Logan previously worked and was also unaware of his relation to his uncle, and committed suicide in his office. Frederick died in the military camp from arson, which was later revealed to have been set by Dakin, Wolverine's son. Now, this was supposed to be the end of the Hudson name, since neither Elias nor Frederick had any children. Well, none by their wives, that is. Prior to his death, Frederick was having an extramarital affair with his secretary, a woman named Caitlin MacDonald. He ended up getting her pregnant with his son and denied paternity even after the boy was born. Out of spite, Caitlin put Frederick as the father on the birth certificate and even named the boy after his father, Frederick Hudson II. Caitlin then committed suicide by hanging herself by her bedsheets outside of her hospital window, just 2 days after giving birth. Now, Frederick Hudson II, he grew up in an orphanage and by all accounts was a violent man. He died in a bar fight at the age of 30 after sustaining some fatal stab wounds. He died in that bar fight, but not before ensuring that his family's name would go on. An illegitimate child himself, he fathered 3 illegitimate sons of his own, each by a different woman. The firstborn was Truett Hudson, who later became known as Professor Thornton. He was the bald-headed guy with sunglasses who oversaw the Weapon X program, including when Logan underwent the adamantium bonding process. This was also depicted in the 90s cartoon for the X-Men series as well. The second born was Victor Hudson, who was born to a nun named Bernice. He was born both mute and blind, but upon adulthood became a powerhouse enforcer for a man named Romulus. The youngest son was James MacDonald Hudson, who later became Guardian, the founder and leader of Alpha Flight. So Wolverine and Guardian, they're second cousins since Guardian's paternal grandfather and Wolverine's mother were siblings. Okay, folks, that's what I got for you today, all about James MacDonald Hudson, Guardian, Vindicator, Weapon Alpha. Tune in next week. I'll be doing a power expose on one of the X-Men's most popular characters. Tune in then, folks, and I'll see you then. Later.
Mansion, apartment.
Shack house. Yes!